In 732 AD, the world trembled with ambition, but the Silk Road moved quietly, carrying ordinary people through an unremarkable night that history never bothered to interrupt. Many listen quietly here, night after night. If this calm travels with you, you may stay. Subscribing keeps this silence alive. The year is 732 AD, though nothing about this night insists on being remembered. Dates matter to historians, not to roads. The world beyond this stretch of land is unsettled empires, adjusting their borders, courts rehearsing authority, messengers carrying urgency in every direction. Yet here, along the Silk Road, none of that noise quite arrives. The road does not hurry in response to instability. It does not slow down either. It continues at the pace it always has, a pace learned not from rulers but from feet, hooves, and the fragile tolerance of human bodies. This is the middle period of the Tang world, a time scholars will later describe with precision and confidence. They will argue about strength, reach, and influence. They will chart political gravity as if it were weather. But this night does not feel like the center of anything. It feels peripheral, even to itself. The road runs through Central Asia without ceremony, crossing regions shaped not by single powers, but by overlapping realities. Merchants negotiating survival, empires extending attention without full control, grasslands that belong more to animals than flags, and deserts that accept none of these distinctions. Central Asia at night does not look divided. It looks continuous. Steppe becomes dust. Dust becomes stone. Stone becomes wall. Wall becomes shelter. The divisions that matter during the day, customs posts, tolls, jurisdictions thin out after dark. What remains is function. Shelter functions. Water functions. Sleep, when it comes, functions poorly, but well enough. This is a single night, not a symbolic one, not a decisive one. There is no battle echoing in the distance, no proclamation being drafted by torchlight. No dynasty is being announced or overturned here. Whatever historians might later say about this year, this particular night has no ambition to participate. It is ordinary, and that is precisely why it matters. The Silk Road, despite its reputation, was never a single thing. It was not built. It was not designed. It was not governed in any complete sense. It emerged where movement solved more problems than staying still. It thickened where water could be found, where animals could rest, where people could exchange goods without needing to trust each other too much. By 732 AD, this network had already learned something essential. Survival prefers repetition over drama. Tonight, that lesson plays out quietly. A caravan has stopped, not because it has reached a destination, but because night has reached it. Movement gives way to arrangement. Loads are checked not for value, but for balance. Animals are secured with practiced motions that do not require conversation. People lower themselves onto the ground, as if negotiating with gravity itself, choosing positions that might allow them to stand again later. No one here is thinking in terms of continents or civilizations. They are thinking about the immediate math of endurance, how much water remains, how stiff the morning will feel, whether the wind will change direction before dawn. These are the calculations that keep trade alive, not strategy, but tolerance. Goods lie nearby silk, folded carefully against dust, spices sealed against air, metal wrapped to avoid unnecessary sound. These items will someday be called evidence of exchange, proof of early globalization, symbols of connection between distant worlds. Tonight they are simply burdens that must not be lost. Their future importance is irrelevant to the people guarding them. What matters is that they survive the night intact, because survival is always measured one night at a time. The road itself seems indifferent to what passes along it. It does not favor luxury over necessity. It does not distinguish between sacred objects and practical ones. It accepts weight and releases it elsewhere. That is its entire function. If there is wisdom here, it is not philosophical, it is logistical. Somewhere beyond the range of firelight, the landscape stretches outward unconcerned. The steppe does not care that it has been crossed for centuries. The desert does not record footsteps. Empires may imagine these spaces as corridors, but at night they are simply environments that allow rest under specific conditions and deny it under others. This is why the Silk Road survived periods of chaos. Not because it was protected, but because it was ignored just enough, too useful to destroy, too diffuse to control. It belonged to no single authority long enough to collapse when that authority weakened. Its resilience came from modest expectations. Tonight reflects that modesty. No one is planning far ahead. The future is reduced to mourning. Mourning is reduced to standing up. Standing up is reduced to whether the body will cooperate. And so the night proceeds. Quietly, imperfectly, successfully. History often looks for turning points. This night offers none. It does not transform the world. It does not announce change. It simply allows continuation. And continuation, over centuries, becomes indistinguishable from destiny. The Silk Road does not need to be remembered to function. It only needs nights like this, unremarkable, uninterrupted, and just comfortable enough to make tomorrow possible. The road never actually sleeps. It simply lowers its voice. During the day, it performs. It speaks in negotiations that pretend to be polite while counting advantage, in taxes that change hands with rehearsed frustration, in documents that insist on order while knowing they will be bent, stamped, translated, or quietly ignored before sunset. Daytime on the Silk Road is loud, in an official way. Everyone is awake for a reason. Everyone has something to prove: value, authority, legitimacy, relevance. But night removes the audience. When darkness settles in, the road stops explaining itself. No one is negotiating now. No one is calculating tariffs by firelight. Paper rests uselessly, suddenly very fragile, suddenly very flammable. Instead, the sounds simplify. A camel exhales not dramatically, not symbolically, just enough to remind the air that it is still needed. Rope shifts against wood with a soft complaint, the sound of something holding rather than moving. Leather creaks. A load settles more comfortably than the person guarding it. People sleep beside goods worth an entire lifetime, not because they are sentimental, but because distance makes trust expensive. You do not leave silk unattended. You do not let spices wander off into the night. You certainly do not assume tomorrow will be generous enough to replace what disappears. There is a quiet irony in this arrangement. These objects so celebrated elsewhere mean nothing unless they survive this ordinary night. Global exchange depends briefly on a man sleeping lightly and a knot tied well enough. The road, meanwhile, watches without comment. It does not congratulate success. It does not mourn losses. It is seen both too often to react. At night, hierarchy dissolves faster than etiquette. A wealthy merchant snores no more gracefully than a hired guard. A seasoned trader wakes just as often as someone on their first journey. Everyone negotiates with the same ground, the same cold, the same uncomfortable awareness that morning is not guaranteed but expected anyway. This is the version of the Silk Road that rarely makes it into stories, not the bridge between civilizations, not the artery of empires, but a campsite that functions well enough to be repeated. The road continues not because it is ambitious, but because it is practical. It speaks softly at night because it has nothing left to persuade. It only needs to endure until dawn. And so it does quietly, imperfectly, with just enough care to keep the world moving again. When the caravan stops. Movement is what the Silk Road is famous for, but stopping is what kept it alive. At some point in the evening, long before anyone would call it night, the caravan accepts a truth it never debates. Forward motion has reached its limit for the day, not because the destination is near, not because progress has been achieved, but because bodies, animals, and attention have all reached a quiet agreement. This is enough. The stopping does not arrive dramatically. There is no signal, no announcement, no moment where someone stands and declares that the road will rest here. It happens the way most necessary things happen, gradually, without ceremony, until motion simply thins out and settles. Camels slow first. They always do. Not because they understand trade or borders or empires that imagine themselves permanent. Camels understand rhythm, distance measured in breath, effort measured in joints, time measured in how long a body can repeat the same motion without resentment. When that internal calculation shifts, they stop arguing with the road. A camel has no interest in where it is on a map. It does not care if this ground technically belongs to someone else. It does not know that silk is valuable, or that paper will one day matter more than steel. It only knows whether the pace has remained tolerable. The Silk Road learned this lesson early. Animals are better historians than people. They remember what works. When the caravan stops, the road stops pretending it is about movement at all. It becomes a temporary geometry of stillness. Loads are lowered, straps loosened, weights redistributed. Everything shifts from forward intention to vertical survival. Goods emerge from motion into presence. Silk rests first, carefully, because it demands it. Folded against dust, wrapped against moisture, guarded against touch. It looks unimpressive here. Just fabric, quiet, too soft to announce its influence. No one standing nearby is thinking about distant courts or ceremonial garments. Silk tonight is simply something that must not be ruined. Spices wait next. They smell faintly even through layers meant to silence them. Their value is abstract at this hour, a scent without context, a future appetite somewhere else. No one tastes them, no one celebrates them. They are sealed and watched like secrets. Paper lies protected from the air, as if the air itself were suspicious, which it is. Paper does not belong comfortably to night camps. It feels out of place, too fragile for the company it keeps. Yet it travels anyway, trusting routine more than safety. Metal rests without complaint, tools, ingots, objects that pretend to be patient but are simply durable. Metal has always understood waiting. Together, these goods create the illusion of importance, but importance does not matter here. What matters is balance. What matters is that nothing shifts unexpectedly while everyone sleeps. People arrange themselves around this stillness as if orbiting it. No one here remembers how many borders they cross to arrive at this point. Borders are a daytime concern. Borders belong to light, to papers, to voices raised with confidence. At night, borders collapse into something much simpler: how far it is to water, and whether anyone nearby is likely to take what isn't theirs. Ask someone here how many jurisdictions they pass through, and you will get silence. Ask them where they last stopped, and you will get detail. That place had wind. That place had bad water. That place had a wall that leaned but held. Memory prioritizes rest over movement. Always has. People lower themselves onto the ground the way one negotiates with gravity carefully, experimentally, hoping for cooperation. Positions are chosen not for comfort, but for repeatability. The question is never, can I sleep well, but can I stand up again? Someone rubs their hands together not for warmth, but to feel them respond. Someone else shifts their weight, testing an ache they already understand. There is no conversation about pain. Pain is assumed. It does not require explanation. The road watches this without reaction. It has seen countless caravans stop in precisely this way. It knows that stopping is not failure, it is maintenance. The road would not exist if it demanded constant movement. It survives because it allows interruption. This is the quiet irony few bother to notice. The Silk Road is celebrated for connecting places, yet it only functions because it permits disconnection from progress, from urgency, from ambition. At night, ambition sleeps poorly anyway. No one is planning routes beyond the next stretch. No one is calculating profit margins with enthusiasm. Numbers exist, but they are tired numbers. They have been carried too far to demand attention. The people here are not dreamers tonight. They are custodians of continuity. Their task is not to advance history, but to prevent it from unraveling while they rest. A guard sits longer than necessary, not because danger is imminent, but because vigilance is cheaper than recovery. Someone else checks a knot again, knowing it will hold, checking anyway. These gestures are not paranoia. They are habit refined by loss. Somewhere nearby, a camel settles with a sound that suggests mild disappointment with the entire arrangement. No one responds. Everyone understands. The road in this moment is no longer a line across continents. It is a small circle of awareness. Firelight, breath, weight, silence thick enough to notice. If movement is what history remembers, stopping is what it depends on. Without nights like this, ordinary, uncomfortable, unremarkable, the Silk Road would have collapsed under its own legend. It exists because people learned when not to move. And so the caravan stops. Not as an ending, not as a pause between important things, but as the most important thing it does all day. The Caravanserai at midnight. There is a place along the road where questions stop arriving before people do. It is not announced. It is not impressive from a distance. It does not try to look permanent. This is the Caravanserai. By midnight, it has shed any remaining pretense of importance. Whatever authority it borrowed from daylight rules, records, expectations, has quietly stepped aside. What remains is function stripped to its essentials. The building does not care where you came from. It does not ask what language you spoke this morning. It does not demand proof of loyalty, origin, or future intention. Its only requirement is simple: sleep without causing trouble. The walls are thick, but not elegant. They are built to resist weather, not admiration. Their surface tells stories, only to those who run their hands across. It scratches from loads dragged too carelessly, dark marks where fires once leaned too close, faint impressions of repairs done in a hurry. This is not architecture meant to inspire. It is architecture meant to survive indifference. Inside, the space is arranged around necessity rather than comfort. Water is present, not abundant, not celebrated, but there. Enough to drink, enough to wash dust from hands, enough to justify stopping at all. People approach it carefully, not out of reverence, but habit. Water on the road is never casual. The walls do their job quietly. They block wind, discourage animals, and reduce the night to something manageable. Not safe exactly, just safer than outside. The difference matters. And then there is darkness. Not the kind that frightens, the kind that protects. The darkness inside a caravanserai is deliberate. Torches are few, fires are controlled, light is rationed like everything else. Too much visibility invites attention. Too little invites accidents. The balance has been learned over generations by people who did not survive mistakes twice. By midnight, the courtyard holds a strange collection of lives that would rarely share a space anywhere else. A Persian trader sleeps close to his bundles, not because he distrusts everyone, but because trust costs energy he no longer has. A Sogdian merchant lies nearby, wrapped tightly, his dreams shaped by roots rather than cities. Somewhere along the wall, a Chinese traveler rests with his back against stone that feels nothing like home, but close enough to allow the body to release its guard. And then there are others, people whose names do not align neatly with regions, people who have traveled long enough that origin feels theoretical, people who no longer introduce themselves with certainty. They belong to the road now, not emotionally, but practically. At night, identity softens, accents fade when no one is listening closely, clothing loses its significance when everyone is equally tired. Social rank collapses into horizontal arrangements on hard ground. In the dark, a wealthy merchant and a hired guard breathe at the same rhythm. The caravanserai does not enforce equality. It simply allows exhaustion to do the work. No one tells stories here. Not because there are none to tell, but because storytelling requires energy. It requires an audience willing to care. At midnight, attention is too scarce to waste on narrative. Instead, there is silence punctuated by practical sound, someone shifting their position, someone coughing carefully so it does not escalate, the quiet clink of metal settling as a load relaxes. This is not a place for performance, it is a place for recovery. There is a subtle irony in this. The Silk Road is remembered as a grand connector of cultures, yet the spaces that sustained it were intentionally bland. Caravanserais avoided personality. They refused to represent anything beyond utility. They did not advertise identity because identity complicates rest. Here, no one asks what gods you honor. No one inquires about allegiance. No one wonders what side of history you will eventually land on. Those questions belong to daylight. At night, survival prefers anonymity. Somewhere near the entrance, a guard remains awake, not alert exactly, but not asleep either. His role is less about defense and more about reassurance. The knowledge that someone is watching allows everyone else to stop pretending they can. He does not know everyone here. He does not want to. His job is not to recognize faces, but to notice disruption, a sound too sharp, a movement too sudden, a disagreement that might grow teeth. Mostly, nothing happens. That is success. The caravanserai does not promise safety in the heroic sense. It offers something more reliable, a reduction of risk. It lowers the volume of danger to something the body can tolerate for a few hours. And so people sleep. They sleep in layers, in clothes that itch, with possessions arranged like barriers against loss. They sleep lightly, not because they are afraid, but because the road has taught them that deep sleep is a luxury best postponed. By the time the sky begins to shift long before dawn announces itself, some will wake without knowing why. Habit does that. The body remembers movement even while resting. Soon the caravanserai will empty without ceremony. No one will thank it. No one will commemorate their stay. The building does not expect gratitude. It will remain waiting for the next wave of tired strangers who need the same unglamorous mercy. A place that asks nothing, provides just enough, and disappears again by morning. In the grand narratives of history, this structure barely registers. It does not conquer, innovate, or inspire. Yet without it, the road would fracture into impossible distances. Empires rise on ambition. Roots survive on places like this. At midnight, the caravanserai does not belong to any culture. It belongs to rest. And that, quietly, is enough to keep the world moving. The sounds of the road when no one is watching. History is often imagined as something that speaks. It gives orders, it makes announcements, it declares itself important. But this night offers a correction. History does not speak here. It breathes. When no one is watching, when the road is left alone with itself, the sounds that remain are not impressive. They do not demand attention. They do not organize themselves into meaning. They simply exist, quietly insisting that motion is still possible. The desert wind moves first, not dramatically, not with the confidence of storms that earn names. This wind moves like a thought that never becomes a sentence. It slides along stone and sand, adjusting itself around obstacles without resistance. It does not announce direction. It does not care where it has been. The wind does not know it is crossing a famous route. It would behave the same way if no one had ever walked here at all. It passes through the gaps between walls, touches fabric, withdraws. It carries no messages. It does not carry prophecy. It only tests the edges of things to see what remains loose. Somewhere nearby, leather meets wood. The sound is small, easy to miss. A saddle settling against a post, a strap adjusting under its own weight. Leather has learned patience over centuries of being pulled, tightened, loosened again. It does not protest loudly anymore. This sound is not communication, it is confirmation. It says the load is still there. that gravity is still working, that nothing has slipped away unnoticed. If history had a voice here, this would be it. Reassurance delivered at a volume just above silence. Nearby, a charcoal fire finishes the work it started earlier. There is no flame now, just embers dim and stubborn, holding heat longer than expected. Charcoal does not go out all at once. It withdraws slowly, as if reconsidering. The fire makes a sound that barely qualifies as one, a soft collapse, a faint shift. It is the sound of something ending without ceremony. No one marks the moment. No one records the exact second the heat becomes memory. This is how most things conclude. There are no speeches tonight. No one stands to summarize the journey so far. No one outlines the risks ahead. No one delivers a moral lesson to the dark. Speeches require belief that someone needs convincing. At night, belief is tired. It lies down with everything else. There are no negotiations either. No bargaining whispered into torchlight. No subtle rearrangement of power. Contracts wait for morning. At this hour, language feels unnecessary. It costs too much effort for too little return. Even writing has withdrawn. Paper stays folded. Ink remains sealed. Hands that write during the day now rest uselessly in sleeves or beneath blankets. History will be written later, by people far from this place, using words that will never quite fit what happened here. This night will not object. The road has never argued with historians. It knows better. What keeps the Silk Road alive is not recorded. It cannot be. The mechanisms are too small, too repetitive, too quiet to feel worth noting. A breath held longer than expected. A cough suppressed so it doesn't spread concern. A hand reaching instinctively for an object that must still be there. These are not events. They are maintenance. Someone turns in their sleep. The sound of fabric shifting against dust feels loud only because everything else has grown so quiet. Somewhere, an animal exhales a long, resigned breath that suggests neither fear nor comfort, just acceptance. This is the soundscape of continuity. It lacks drama. It lacks ambition. It lacks the kind of energy historians prefer, which is precisely why it works. The Silk Road does not move forward on declarations. It moves forward on nights where nothing goes wrong loudly enough to be remembered, where silence holds long enough for rest to occur, where small sounds confirm that systems biological, material, habitual are still functioning. There is a dry irony here if one listens carefully. Empires rise and fall with noise. The road survives by avoiding it. The quieter it becomes, the more resilient it is. Noise attracts attention. Attention attracts interference. Interference disrupts routine. Routine, more than power, is what sustains movement across impossible distances. So the road breathes, in and out. Wind, leather, cooling stone. Each sound barely registers. Together, they form something sturdier than speeches. By the time the sky begins to shift, long before color returns, these sounds will fade without conclusion. They will not announce their departure. They will simply stop being necessary. And the road will continue, not because it was guided, but because it was allowed to remain quiet long enough to recover. History will later shout about this era. This night will remain silent. And in that silence, the world keeps working. The people who slept beside the future. Somewhere in the darkness, a bundle rests on the ground. It does not look like a future. It looks like fabric, folded, wrapped, weighted just enough to stay put. A single bale of silk lies beside a sleeping body. The contrast is unremarkable to anyone passing by. On this road, value and exhaustion share space without comment. Silk has learned to travel humbly. People have learned to sleep without certainty. This bundle may one day alter a life far from here. It may be traded for land, influence, marriage, comfort. It may be unwrapped in a city that believes itself permanent. None of that is visible now. Here it is just another object that must not disappear before morning. The person guarding it does not know where it will end up. They do not calculate its final worth. They do not imagine the hands that will eventually touch it with admiration. Their relationship to this object is immediate and unforgiving. If it is lost, their life does not become inconvenient, it becomes unrecognizable. This is the quiet truth of trade that rarely survives into stories. Futures are carried by people who do not get to participate in them. They handle potential without access to outcome. Their job is not to benefit from value, but to preserve it long enough for someone else to claim it. The guard sleeps lightly, not out of fear exactly, out of familiarity. Fear is loud. Habit is quiet. They position themselves close enough to feel the presence of the goods without touching them. Touching is unnecessary. Awareness is sufficient. Their sleep is a compromise, deep enough to recover, shallow enough to respond. They wake briefly, not because something is wrong, but because nothing is guaranteed. This waking does not register as anxiety. It registers as routine. The road has trained them well. Around them, other bundles lie arranged like punctuation marks in the dark. Each one carries its own imagined importance, most of which will never materialize. Some will be damaged, some delayed, some will quietly change hands, too many times to remember their origin. Yet each one is guarded with the same seriousness. This is another irony the Silk Road understands instinctively. Value is abstract. Loss is not. People do not sleep beside goods because they worship them. They sleep beside them because distance turns objects into obligations. A bale of silk cannot defend itself. It cannot negotiate. It cannot explain its importance if questioned. So, a human body does that work instead. There is something unsettling about this arrangement if one pauses long enough to notice. Entire futures balanced against the quality of a single night's rest. World-spanning exchange reduced to a man waking at the right moment. History likes to imagine that change arrives through intention, but most change arrives through custody. Someone holds something long enough, someone else receives it later. Meaning is assigned afterward. The guard does not think of themselves as part of history. They are thinking about whether the ground is colder than it was an hour ago, whether the wind has shifted enough to matter, whether the weight beside them still feels correct. They measure responsibility through sensation, not theory. Somewhere nearby, another sleeper turns over, careful not to disturb the bundles between them. Courtesy here is not moral. It is practical. You do not trip over the future if you can help it. The night does not dramatize any of this. It does not pause for reflection. This is how large systems operate when stripped of spectacle. Quiet agreements, silent vigilance, people doing just enough to prevent collapse. The Silk Road is often praised as a conduit of ideas, but ideas travel poorly without protection. It is objects that move first, heavy, fragile, valuable objects that demand attention. And it is people like this who provide it, without ever being invited to imagine the consequences. There is a faint humor in this imbalance, if one allows it. The grand exchange of civilizations depends, briefly, on someone who would prefer to be asleep. Entire economic arcs hinge on a person waking up annoyed but alert. The guard adjusts slightly, a knee aches, a shoulder complains. None of this is heroic. None of it needs to be. They do not dream of wealth. Dreams are inefficient here. Dreams distract. The body dreams only of balance, of a position that will not punish it too harshly by morning. This is what it means to sleep beside the future without knowing it, to participate fully without comprehension, to enable outcomes that will never circle back in gratitude. The road does not correct this imbalance. It thrives on it. By dawn, the bundle will be lifted again, re-secured, counted without ceremony. The guard will rise, stiff and uncelebrated, and continue walking beside possibilities they will never witness. The silk will move on. The guard will move with it. History will later credit the trade, not the sleep. But without this night, without this quiet, imperfect vigilance, the future would have nowhere to rest. And so the road continues, carried forward by people who never see what they are carrying toward. They sleep beside tomorrow and wake to today. The road that belonged to no one. Ownership is a daytime idea. It arrives with documents, witnesses, seals, and the confidence that lines drawn on paper can outlast weather. At night, ownership grows quiet. It loses its vocabulary. The road does not recognize signatures after dark. No one built the Silk Road. This fact unsettles people who prefer beginnings that can be commemorated. There is no foundation ceremony to return to, no architect to admire, no moment when someone stood back and said, "Yes, this will connect the world." The road appeared instead where movement solved a problem. Then it appeared again somewhere else, and again. Paths thickened where feet repeated themselves. Roots hardened where hooves agreed. Corridors formed where stopping was survivable and continuing felt possible. This is not how empires like to imagine infrastructure. Empires prefer intention. They prefer authorship. They prefer the assurance that what exists does so because someone powerful wanted it. The Silk Road offers no such comfort. No single authority ever controlled it completely. Attempts were made, of course. There were tolls, patrols, checkpoints, proclamations. Maps were drawn with confidence that did not survive the next season. Control arrived in sections briefly and then drifted away again. The road tolerated this the way it tolerated everything else, by outlasting attention. At night, this becomes obvious. The darkness does not belong to anyone either. It does not respect jurisdictions. It does not pause at borders. It settles evenly, erasing distinctions that matter only when observed. In this darkness, the road reveals its real allegiance. It belongs to those who need it. Not in the romantic sense, not because it cares, but because need is persistent in ways ambition is not. The road exists because someone needs to go somewhere they cannot stay. Because someone else needs to stop somewhere they cannot remain visible. Because someone tonight needs to survive one more day without calling it survival. These needs are modest. That is their strength. A merchant needs to move goods because stillness turns value into burden. A guard needs to rest because vigilance without rest becomes noise. An animal needs to stop because motion is not infinite. The road responds to these needs without judgment. It does not reward virtue. It does not punish failure. It allows repetition until repetition becomes structure. There is a faint irony here that Knight seems happy to highlight. Empires believe roads exist to serve power. The Silk Road exists to serve continuation. Power seeks permanence. Continuation seeks tomorrow. No one wakes at midnight to declare loyalty to the road. No one pledges allegiance to its direction. They use it because the alternative is worse. This is not devotion. It is pragmatism refined by exhaustion. The road does not demand belief. It does not require identification. It does not ask for gratitude. It only asks that you understand its limits. You can walk it, you can rest on it, but you cannot own it. Those who tried learned this slowly. Control required attention. Attention required resources. Resources required stability. Stability on the road was always temporary. At night, when the camp grows quiet, these truths feel less theoretical. The road does not glow with importance. It does not hum with destiny. It lies there, accepting weight, releasing it later, indifferent to the stories told about it elsewhere. People often say the Silk Road connected civilizations. This is accurate but incomplete. It also disconnected people from certainty. It asked them to exist between places long enough to forget which labels mattered. And it did so without ever claiming responsibility. Somewhere nearby, someone wakes briefly, unsure why. Perhaps the ground shifted. Perhaps a sound registered without meaning. They listen. Nothing demands action. They lie back down. The road does not congratulate itself for this restraint. It does not interpret the moment as success. It simply continues being available. This is how systems survive when they do not belong to anyone. They are used gently, not defended passionately. They are maintained by habit rather than ideology. The Silk Road endured because it did not ask to be protected. It did not present itself as an asset to be secured. It was too scattered for that, too cooperative with human weakness. By morning, people will move again. Not because the road commands them, but because stopping forever is not an option. The road accommodates this reality without commentary. In daylight, others will argue about who benefits, who controls, who profits. At night, the answers simplify. The road exists because someone still needs it. That is all. No one owns the Silk Road because ownership requires boundaries, and boundaries require agreement. The road thrived precisely because it refused both. It belonged to movement and rest in equal measure, to exhaustion and recovery, to those passing through and those lingering briefly. It belonged to no one powerful enough to end it, and that, quietly, is why it survived. Near dawn, the road prepares to continue. The moment before dawn is not dramatic. It never has been. There is no signal that announces it, no clear dividing line where night formally ends and morning claims authority. The darkness simply thins, reluctantly, as if deciding whether the effort is worth it. This is not a time for speeches. No one clears their throat to address the camp. No one raises a hand to summarize what has been accomplished overnight. No one pauses to reflect on the significance of having survived. Reflection is a luxury for people who are not about to move again. Instead, small motions begin to appear, barely noticeable at first. A figure shifts, not awake yet, but no longer fully asleep. An animal adjusts its weight, sensing change without understanding it. The road itself remains silent, offering no instruction. Near dawn, history withdraws completely. If history prefers declarations and conclusions, this hour provides neither. It offers preparation without narrative, action without explanation. The world resumes its function without bothering to justify it. Someone reaches for a rope and reties a knot that does not need retightening. This is not inefficiency. It is reassurance. A second pull confirms that yesterday's decisions still hold. Another person checks a bundle quickly, no inventory, no ceremony, just a glance, a hand placed briefly where weight should be. Counting is unnecessary. Familiarity is enough. The goods have not changed, the people have. Bodies rise reluctantly, protesting just enough to be acknowledged. Stiffness negotiates with intention. No one expects comfort. Comfort was never part of the agreement. There is a quiet humor in this moment if one is paying attention. Entire networks of exchange prepare to resume movement without anyone announcing it. No trumpets, no commands, just routine asserting itself. Empires require orders. Roads require cooperation. Near dawn, the Silk Road reveals its preference. There is no attempt to define direction clearly. People know where they are going only in the broadest sense, east or west, toward water, away from what is no longer sustainable. Precision is postponed. The horizon will clarify later once light improves. This vagueness is not uncertainty. It is efficiency. Too much clarity invites revision. Too much planning invites disappointment. The road works best when expectations remain flexible. Someone tightens a strap with practiced motion. Someone else checks an animal's footing, not with affection, but respect. These interactions are brief, efficient, almost indifferent. Nothing here requires ceremony. There is no writing. No one records that this group rested here. No one documents who slept beside whom. No one notes the weather conditions or the quality of rest. Paper will come later somewhere else, carried by people who were not present. This moment is not for preservation. It is for continuation. The fire that once warmed the camp has finished its task. Its remains are unremarkable. No one mourns its passing. It did what was required and then stepped aside. Near dawn, the road does not look forward with ambition. It does not reflect backward with pride. It exists in a narrow present, defined by readiness. This is another truth rarely emphasized in grand histories. Progress rarely feels like progress while it is happening. It feels like effort repeated despite reluctance. The road prepares itself through others. It does not move on its own. It waits to be activated. A final check of loads. A quiet exchange of glances that replace conversation. A mutual understanding that whatever happened last night is now irrelevant. Only what remains matters. Someone yawns without apology. Someone stretches carefully, as if aware that their body will remember this moment later. No one rushes. Rushing would be suspicious. The light continues to change. Edges sharpen. Colors return cautiously. The camp becomes visible again, stripped of the protective anonymity night provided. Identity will matter more soon. Roles will reassert themselves. Voices will return, but not yet. For a brief interval, the road exists in a state of neutrality. It has not fully re-entered the world of plans and power. It has not yet surrendered its quiet. This is when it is most honest. There is a faint irony in the way history imagines beginnings. It prefers moments of decision, declarations, symbolic starts. The Silk Road begins each day without any of these. It begins because people stand up, because animals move, because loads lift, because staying would eventually cost more than leaving. That is all. Near dawn, the road does not promise success. It does not guarantee safety. It does not offer meaning. It offers continuity. And continuity, repeated often enough, becomes history, whether anyone notices or not. Soon the caravan will move. Soon the camp will dissolve without leaving evidence worth recording. The road will look empty again, as if nothing passed through. This illusion is one of its greatest strengths. The Silk Road survives not by announcing itself, but by preparing quietly to continue again and again and again each morning, just before anyone is awake enough to argue with it. The bodies that kept the road real. There is a point in the night when the Silk Road stops feeling like a route and starts feeling like a collection of bodies trying not to fail, not spiritually, not philosophically, physically. This is not the version of history that enjoys metaphors. It has very little patience for symbolism. It is concerned instead with joints, temperature, circulation, and the small negotiations people make with discomfort so they can remain upright tomorrow. Here, the road is carried not by ideas, but by backs, by knees that bend more slowly than they used to, by hands that ache before they even close around a rope, by feet that no longer complain loudly because they learned long ago that complaint does not shorten distance. Fatigue settles into the camp, the way cold does evenly, without asking permission. Someone lies awake not because they are alert, but because their body has not yet decided which pain deserves attention first. Another sleeps immediately, not because they are comfortable, but because exhaustion has finally overruled caution. Both are correct. Both are necessary. The road does not prefer one strategy over the other. Cold works its way into everything eventually. It slips under layers of cloth. It presses against skin that has been exposed to too much wind and too many nights like this one. No one is surprised by it. Surprise requires energy. Cold receives acknowledgement and nothing more. Someone pulls fabric tighter, knowing it will help only briefly. Someone else does not bother. They already understand the limits of cloth. Pain is present, but not dramatic. It is not the kind that demands attention. It is the kind that waits, the kind that reminds you it will be there again in the morning, exactly where you left it. This familiarity is strangely reassuring. Pain that behaves predictably can be planned around. A shoulder protests when weight shifts. A hip reminds its owner of yesterday's misjudgment. A spine rearranges itself carefully, as if testing a fragile agreement. No one narrates this. There is no language here for endurance. Endurance is simply what remains when alternatives disappear. These bodies are not heroic. They are practical. They do not imagine themselves as part of anything significant. They imagine tomorrow as something that requires preparation, not belief. The Silk Road learned long ago that bodies do not move forever. They require pauses. They require nights like this, where the primary goal is not progress, but recovery, just sufficient to allow progress to resume. This is not rest in the romantic sense. It is maintenance. Someone coughs quietly, controlling the sound so it does not invite concern. Concern leads to conversation. Conversation leads to energy expenditure. Energy is being conserved. Another person shifts position for the fourth time, still dissatisfied. Eventually, dissatisfaction gives up. Sleep arrives not because conditions improve, but because resistance weakens. The road accepts this arrangement. It does not demand comfort. It does not reward suffering. It simply accommodates what the human body can manage repeatedly. There is a subtle, almost unfair irony here. History often credits ambition for movement. It celebrates vision, desire, and the will to go farther. But ambition collapses quickly, without cooperation from ligaments, lungs, and circulation. The grandest plans in the world still require someone to stand up the next morning without falling over. Tonight, ambition is asleep. The body is awake, negotiating terms. Hands that carried goods earlier now rest uselessly at their sides, fingers slightly curled as if still holding weight. Muscle memory does not turn off easily. It lingers just in case. Somewhere nearby, an animal exhales heavily. The sound is not distress, it is relief. A long release of effort that has been postponed all day. No one responds. Everyone understands the language. The road is honest at this hour. It does not pretend that movement is elegant. It does not hide the cost of distance. Distance is paid for in cartilage and sleep deprivation, in layers of stiffness that accumulate quietly until they become identity. And yet the road continues not because bodies are resilient in the abstract, but because they are adaptable in the specific. They learn how to hurt without breaking. They learn which discomforts can be ignored and which cannot. This knowledge is never written down. It cannot be taught. It is acquired through repetition and retained through survival. Someone wakes briefly, disoriented. For a moment, they do not know where they are. This is not panic, it is recalibration. The body checking its surroundings against memory. Stone wall, cold air, weight nearby. Understanding returns. They lie back down. The Silk Road depends on these moments, on bodies that lose certainty and recover it without assistance, on people who do not require explanation to continue. There is a faint, dry humor in the way history later describes such endurance. Words like hardy and rugged appear as if discomfort were a personality trait rather than a condition. Tonight there is nothing romantic about this. A knee hurts because it hurts. Cold is unpleasant because it is cold. Sleep is shallow because it must be. And still it is enough. That is the unsettling truth. The threshold for continuation is lower than anyone would like to admit. The world does not require ideal conditions. It requires conditions that do not quite fail. The road does not move forward on inspiration. It moves forward on bodies that recover just enough to lift weight again. By morning, these bodies will rise stiffly. They will complain briefly, internally, without ceremony. Then they will resume their function as carriers of distance. History will notice the distance, it will not notice the pain. But without nights like this, without the quiet, unglamorous labor of bodies, Enduring themselves, the road would become a concept instead of a reality. And concepts, as the road knows very well, do not walk anywhere on their own. The night that didn't care about history. The night does not know what year it is. It never has. It does not pause to confirm dates. It does not adjust its tone for significant eras. If someone were to whisper 732 AD into the darkness, the night would not respond, not out of defiance, but because the question itself would feel misplaced. The night is not interested in importance. It does not rank moments. It does not elevate certain hours above others. It does not mark anniversaries. It arrives, does its work quietly, and leaves without explanation. This is why the night is such a poor historian and such a reliable witness. Here along the Silk Road, the night settles evenly. It does not distinguish between merchants and guards, between goods worth fortunes and objects that will be discarded by morning. Darkness distributes itself without preference. Everyone receives the same amount. No judgment, no commentary, no footnotes. The night does not ask who mattered today. It does not inquire which empire expanded its influence. It does not check whether borders shifted or treaties were broken somewhere far away. Whatever happened beyond the reach of this campfire is irrelevant to the dark now pressing gently against walls and bodies. History depends on contrast. The night removes it. In the dark, grandeur dissolves. A man who negotiated confidently hours earlier now sleeps with his mouth open. A person carrying wealth snores as inelegantly as someone carrying nothing at all. Identity loosens when no one is looking closely enough to enforce it. This is not equality in any philosophical sense. It is indifference. The night does not care enough to discriminate. Somewhere in the camp, someone dreams, but the dream does not feel prophetic. It is disordered, unfinished, abandoned halfway through. The night has no interest in narrative structure. Dreams are allowed, but coherence is optional. Outside the walls, the landscape continues its quiet routine. The desert does not reposition itself for historical accuracy. The steppe does not adjust its silence to suit future textbooks. The stars do not rearrange themselves to commemorate turning points. They shine because they always do. This is unsettling if one lingers on it. The realization that history so carefully assembled later passes through the night without leaving an impression. That moments people will argue about for centuries once existed as darkness, breath, and a fire going out. The night does not remember who slept here. By morning, it will not recall how many people passed through, what languages they spoke, or what they carried. It will not feel pride for having sheltered them. It will not feel regret if something goes wrong. The night is generous precisely because it is forgetful. There is a faint irony in how desperately people want history to notice them, to be recorded, to be remembered, to matter. Yet every night the world continues without acknowledging any of this effort. The Silk Road survives partly because of this. If every night cared, nothing would move. Reflection would replace rest. Significance would interrupt sleep. The road would collapse under the weight of its own meaning. Instead, the night offers anonymity. It allows people to exist without explanation, to rest without justification, to be unimportant without consequence. Someone wakes briefly, disoriented, unsure of where they are. For a moment, history is gone entirely. There is no past, no future, just breath, darkness, and the question of whether it is safe to return to sleep. The night answers by remaining unchanged. This answer is enough. The camp does not glow with destiny. It does not feel like a crossroads of civilizations. It feels like a place where tired people are temporarily allowed to stop being visible. And that permission is rare. During the day, everything asks to be noticed. At night, nothing does. The road is grateful for this, though gratitude is perhaps too emotional a word. The road simply benefits. It requires nights that do not interfere, nights that do not demand performance. History prefers moments that can be pointed to. The night refuses to be pointed at. It slides past, uncooperative with narrative. It leaves no artifacts beyond the absence of catastrophe. No disaster is its greatest contribution. This is why the night feels unsettling to those who think too much about it. It reveals how little recognition is required for the world to keep functioning, how easily continuity occurs without applause. Empires worry about being forgotten. The night does not worry at all. As the hours pass, nothing remarkable happens, and this is precisely the achievement. The camp remains intact, the people remain alive, the goods remain where they should be. The night does not announce success. It does not frame the outcome. It simply allows morning to arrive. When light finally returns, history will step back in. Names will matter again. Roles will reassert themselves. Direction will be discussed. Importance will be reconstructed. But this night will not object to being overwritten. It never asked to be remembered. And that is its quiet power. The night does not care about history. It only makes history possible by refusing to participate in it at all. Mourning without ceremony. Morning does not arrive with confidence. It never does on the Silk Road. It edges in quietly, as if unsure it is welcome. The light does not flood the camp. It negotiates with it. Shadows retreat only where they must. Colors return cautiously, like guests who have learned not to assume hospitality. Nothing announces the transition. No one calls it morning. No one marks the hour. No one pauses to acknowledge that another night has been survived. Survival does not require recognition. People begin to move not because they feel ready, but because readiness is rarely available. A body that waited to feel prepared would still be lying there when the sun reached its highest point, politely ignored by the rest of the world. Someone sits up slowly, evaluating damage. This is not pessimism. It is inventory. Neck, stiff but cooperative. Legs, reluctant but intact. Hands, cold but functional. The assessment is brief. There is no appeal process. Nearby, an animal rises first, not out of discipline, but because it slept badly and sees no reason to continue pretending. Its movement encourages others. Motion spreads the way it always does, incrementally, without leadership. The road watches this with practiced neutrality. Morning is not a beginning here. It is a continuation that happens to be brighter. There is a faint, dry humor and how often history describes mornings as symbolic: dawn of a new era, new light on old problems, fresh starts. None of this applies here. Morning on the Silk Road does not reset anything. It simply exposes what night already preserved. The caravan looks exactly as it did hours ago, only less forgiving. Dust is visible now, wear is undeniable. Faces regain their details, which no one rushes to study. Eye contact returns briefly, then drifts away. People acknowledge one another just enough to confirm shared existence. No one asks how anyone slept. That question belongs to comfort, not continuity. Goods are lifted again, their weight unchanged by the passage of time. Silk is still silk. Metal still resists. Paper remains fragile, newly suspicious of daylight. The future resumes its burden without commentary. There is no sense of accomplishment in this. Carrying the future has never felt impressive. It feels heavy, awkward, and entirely necessary. Someone adjusts a strap, discovering that what held yesterday will hold today as well. This is reassuring in a small, uncelebrated way. Reliability here is the highest compliment. The road prepares itself by being used. There is no ritual of departure, no farewell to the caravanserai, no gratitude offered to the walls that held back wind and consequence. People do not thank infrastructure. They trust it briefly and then forget it. For a moment, the camp exists in a transitional stillness. Everything is upright now, but nothing has moved forward yet. It is a pause that does not intend to last. This is where the Silk Road feels most honest. Not at night, when anonymity protects. Not in full day, when performance resumes. But here, when obligation quietly outweighs hesitation. Someone looks ahead, not with optimism, but with acceptance. The direction is familiar enough: east or west, toward water, away from what is no longer sustainable. Precision remains unnecessary. The road does not promise clarity. It offers alignment. There is another irony here, subtle enough to miss. The road that connected worlds did so without ever asking people to feel inspired. It did not motivate, it did not persuade, it simply made movement marginally easier than stopping forever. This was enough. History will later compress moments like this into phrases that sound decisive. The caravan departed at dawn, as if departure were a singular act, clean and intentional. In reality, it is a gradual surrender to momentum. Feet begin to move. Animals follow. The line stretches and reforms. Nothing marks the exact second the caravan becomes a caravan again. One moment, it is a collection of individuals standing near objects. The next, it is motion with memory. The road accepts this without reaction. It does not celebrate the resumption of travel. It does not mourn the loss of rest. It remains available, indifferent to preference. By the time the sun gains confidence, the camp will already be dissolving behind them. The ground will keep no record. The air will not hold names. The night will not look back. This is how history actually happens, without witnesses who care enough to interfere. There is no lesson delivered here, no moral extracted from endurance. The Silk Road has never been interested in teaching. It offers patterns, not explanations. People continue because stopping forever is unacceptable. The road exists because it accommodates this refusal. Somewhere far away, historians will later assign meaning to routes like this. They will speak of exchange, diffusion, influence. They will draw lines that imply intention. But here, in this morning that barely qualifies as one, none of that matters. What matters is that the body moves, that the load stays balanced, that the road remains passable. The Silk Road does not need belief. It does not need admiration. It does not need memory. It needs people who will walk it today, not knowing who will walk it next. And so the caravan continues, not because history is waiting, but because life is, quietly, reluctantly, successfully. The road does not look back. The road continues because no one owns it. By the time the sun fully commits to the sky, the Silk Road has already forgotten the night, not in a dramatic way, not as an act of dismissal, simply through use. Tracks are overwritten almost immediately. Dust settles back into itself. Whatever careful arrangements existed hours ago dissolve into movement. The road resumes its most important function, appearing ordinary. This ordinariness is deliberate. Anything that looks exceptional invites attention. Attention invites control. Control invites collapse. The Silk Road survived centuries precisely because it refused to look impressive for very long. It stretches forward now without commentary. No banners mark its direction. No signs reassure travelers they are on the correct path. The road does not explain itself. It assumes that those who need it will find it because they always have. People move along it not because it promises success, but because alternatives narrow quickly elsewhere. Staying becomes heavier than leaving. Leaving becomes routine. Routine becomes structure, and structure eventually becomes history. There is something quietly ironic about how much effort people later invest in explaining the Silk Road. It is described as a system, a network, a bridge between civilizations. All of this is true, and none of it is useful to the people walking it now. What matters is footing. What matters is water. What matters is whether the next stopping place exists at all. Someone walking here today does not think of themselves as part of anything vast. They think in terms of hours, of manageable distance, of what can be endured before the body requires negotiation again. The road cooperates with this scale. It does not insist on long-term vision. It allows short-term thinking to accumulate. This is how it avoids ownership. Empires tried to claim it. They named sections. They taxed segments. They placed guards and imagined permanence. The road complied briefly, then continued elsewhere, adapting to whatever attention was least invasive. Ownership requires borders that stay put. The Silk Road prefers flexibility. It bends where necessary. It thins out where pressure increases. It reappears where conditions improve. No decree ever stopped it completely, because stopping it would have required stopping need itself. And need is stubborn. Someone somewhere always needs to go. Someone always needs to stop. Someone always needs to survive one more day without naming it survival. This is not noble. It is functional. The road does not care who benefits most. It does not adjust itself to fairness. It responds to repetition, not justice. Where movement repeats, it strengthens. Where it does not, it fades without apology. There is a faint humor in how people imagine roads as passive things, as lines waiting to be used. The Silk Road is anything but passive. It is selective in the quietest possible way. It rewards those who learn its rhythms. It inconveniences those who demand certainty. By mid-morning, conversation returns. Deals resume their shape. Words regain their sharpness. Identity stiffens back into place. People remember who they are supposed to be. The night's anonymity dissolves without resistance. Yet something remains. A subtle recalibration. A reminder that none of this requires explanation to continue. The road does not ask travelers to understand it. Understanding slows things down. It asks only that they respond appropriately, rest when rest is possible, move when movement becomes necessary. History prefers intentions, the road prefers responses. This is why it outlasted so many plans. Those who walked it learned not to ask whether the road would take them where they wanted to go. They asked whether it would allow them to keep going at all. These are very different questions. The Silk Road answered the second one often enough. Somewhere behind the caravan, the ground looks empty again. Anyone passing later would see nothing remarkable. No trace of significance. No sign that the future paused here briefly before continuing on someone else's shoulders. This absence is not a failure of memory. It is a strategy. A road that leaves evidence invites control. A road that disappears remains free. As the day advances, the caravan becomes just another movement among many. It blends into the larger pattern of travel that never announces itself as historic while it is happening. And that is the final irony. The Silk Road did not change the world by trying to. It changed the world by continuing, quietly, repeatedly, without ownership, without ceremony, without asking to be remembered. It existed because people used it. It survived because no one could claim it completely. Tonight, somewhere else, another camp will form. Another night will pass without significance. Another morning will arrive without instruction. And the road will still be there, not as a monument, not as a symbol, but as a possibility that refuses to go away. History will chase it forever, trying to define what it was. The road will continue doing what it always did, allowing movement, allowing rest, allowing the world to keep going without ever needing to explain why.